When people talk about carry calibers, the conversation usually turns to this. One is good and one is bad. The truth of the matter is, it's not that simple. Certain calibers are a poor choice in certain roles and better for others, depending on how you carry, what you're using it for, and what you realistically train with. In this episode, we're going to be talking about pistols, the assortment of calibers, the firearm size and accuracy, the ammunition types, the sights, whether it be iron sights or optics, open carry versus concealed carry, and home defense weapons choices and what may be best for you. Now, before we get started, I know that everybody's got opinions on firearms. I'm not claiming to be the know-all, be-all of the gun world, but I will say, as a police officer of 21 years, carrying a firearm or firearms every single day, whether on duty or off duty, I can say I have a professional opinion at least. This isn't about hyper trends. This is about what works in the real world. Why does pistol choice matter? Because pistols are one of the most common firearm owned by people. You need to make your choices based on practical use, control, reliability, and your realistic expectations of what that item or that tool is going to perform. I have a different assortment, and I know I don't have large varieties of the most popular firearms out there. I have this 44 Magnum Super Blackhawk that was a hand-me-down. Then I have this Ruger 22 revolver. It's basically just a target gun. We'll get to that in a minute. And I also have these semi-automatic handguns, both in 9mm and 40 caliber. And then I have a shotgun here, which we'll get to that in a little while. If you choose a revolver, the one thing you can definitely expect from it, a realistic expectation, mind you, would be if I pulled the trigger, it's going to go bang. But there's a downside to it as well. You're limited on ammunition, so you have to be really Johnny on the spot to get more rounds sent down range. So keep that in mind when you're debating between revolver and a semi-automatic handgun. Now, what's the difference? Officer Hollywood. This particular gun is my service weapon that I carry daily, but semi-automatic, think of it like fancy cars, the modern cars we have today. The more gadgets and stuff we put into them, like the touch screens and all that, the more that can go wrong. So semi-automatic, I squeeze the trigger, it should go bang if my magazine's seated correctly, if I have one in the chamber, and if it doesn't misfeed, it'll go bang again. By misfeed, we can get all into that, but I'm just letting you know that more mechanics are happening in this firearm versus a revolver. And that is one thing to make your call on, whether you're going to go with one style or the other. Most firearms problems aren't mechanical failures. They're unrealistic expectations. Pick a firearm that operates the way you expect it to operate, whether it be a revolver or semi-automatic. The next decision you have to make is caliber. One caliber is not like the other. You cannot expect just because of a bigger caliber, you're going to get more performance, or a small caliber will deliver what a larger caliber can do. First up is 22 caliber. I have this Ruger revolver. I'll show you here. The size of the round is quite small, but that doesn't mean it's not lethal. With that said, do you want to put your life on the line and count on a lower caliber such as a 22 to defend yourself with if you don't know if its performance is going to be always consistent? I've seen individuals who have been shot by a 22 caliber, and if it hits a softer area, softer tissue, it will tend to dance around all in there, maybe strike a vital, and it may just do some tissue damage. So whenever you're selecting a firearm for self-defense, I might look past the 22 caliber. That's just my opinion. Next up is a M&P Smith & Wesson Shield 380 EZ model. As you can see, for comparison, the caliber of the 380, the size of the 380 is considerably larger, more gunpowder, more power. Now, 380 is still, to me, not sufficient to do a consistent job. I've seen 380s being used on the streets. Usually the gun that I tend to find is the Bursa Thunder 380, and they have so-so performance. So let's talk about this gun first of all. The easy models that Smith & Wesson made, I anticipated some malfunctions because of the, I don't know how to describe it other than softer springs. It is extremely easy to manipulate this slide. So those with weaker hands, muscles, or females, my wife shoots an easy model, and she finds this very acceptable with the ease of the slide. But with that said, these shield lines that Smith & Wesson have are very dependable guns. So people choose 380 because it's bigger than 22 and just a hair smaller than the 9mm. The reliability is hit or miss, but there's some pros and cons that you need to pay attention to on this. Some of the pros would be it has more velocity, more knockdown power than a 22, but the con is the availability of 380 ammunition, especially during COVIDs when I experienced this, because I've had this gun since then, it was non-existent. And when it is on the shelf, it's more expensive. So there's your pro cons to 380. Some key points of the 380 is it's compact and it's easy to carry. However, convenience doesn't always equal capability. Smaller firearms often demand more focus and control than people expect. Now, as I mentioned before, this is a P320 made by Sig Sauer. This is my service weapon. As you can see, it's got optic on it. This is the 9mm round. Comparison to the 380 and the 22, you can see considerable size difference. 9mm is the most common service caliber and has become the standard. Our department used to have 40 caliber handguns, the Sig Sauer 229, 226, it's just difference in size. But it was a 40 caliber and we had those for years. But as studies went on, they found the benefits of 9mm was the availability of lower recoil. You can hold more ammunition in each magazine. Firearms that operate with the 9mm tend to be more balanced. The availability of the ammunition is greater and it's got proven performance behind it. There's a reason that it's become the standard. But I've seen many individuals that have been struck by a 9mm round. It does its job that it's designed to do. Creates injury, if not death. I've seen vehicles that have been struck by 9mm rounds, and I could tell they were hollow points because of the star-like pattern as it expanded, striking the windows. Now, the odd thing I found about this is the windshield. I can understand it not penetrating a windshield. However, on the side windows, the driver and the passenger sides, they were also not broken. That was a little strange to me. So that's something to know, even you gun guys. You're not always going to get penetration on harder objects. Now homes, for this home defense section, which we'll cover at the very end, I've seen 9mm go through up to 6 walls. Now we're talking half-inch sheetrock with hollow walls, interior walls. That's pretty heavy penetration. I would almost call that, or would call that, over penetration. Something to keep in mind. This is also a 9mm Glock 43. It's a compact weapon. Some things to consider. This magazine has extended grip on it. Without it, you can see my pinky has nothing to grip. That can be a problem when coming to accuracy. So keep in mind that compact is not always the way to go. Balance matters more than extremes. Next up is Smith & Wesson 40 cal. This is a Glock 22 model. It's a full-size handgun, which I will tell you right now, compared to your compact, a good grip naturally fits the average man's hand on these guns. On the full-size weapons, especially with new shooters, you might find it easier to learn how to shoot using a full-size pistol. In comparison, the 40, the 9, the 380, and the 22, you can see the differences on the size of the caliber. Now, 40 caliber was historically popular, as I mentioned before. Our department issued 40 caliber. We moved on to the 9. One of the biggest things I noticed the difference on is the 40 caliber has a sharper recoil, meaning it takes more time to get back on target and send more rounds downrange. Another thing is 40 caliber, due to its recoil, it may be harder to handle for some shooters. So the 40 caliber is a good round, and it didn't fail, it didn't age well. More recoil doesn't always mean better performance. The .44 Magnum has limited practicality. But like I said, it was a hand-me-down gun. I love shooting this gun. It is well balanced for a .44 Magnum. The weight of the barrel eats up 90% of that recoil. I can get back on target and keep on going. But you won't see me carrying this as my sidearm or my off-duty carry in order to protect myself. One, the over-penetration is ridiculous with this gun. And two, how can I conceal this? It's not a practical gun for daily carry, but I love shooting it. Here's another comparison of the round. As you have your .44 Magnum, your 40 cal, your 9mm, oops, your .380, and your .22. Just take out these middle ones and check out the difference in those. Now, as I mentioned before, this particular firearm, this revolver, is a single action, meaning, if you ever hear that term, single action is you have to pull the hammer back each and every time in order to fire the firearm. There are double action revolvers as well, where you can just pull the trigger and it will move the hammer for you. This caliber fills a specific role, just not a general one. Now, I know I touched on some of these things that I'm about to discuss earlier. However, it is important for especially new shooters to, when deciding what kind of firearm to get, understand that everything plays a role when it comes to firearm size and accuracy. Your longer barrels will give you more accuracy on your aim. Shorter barrels have less room for error, meaning you have to really aim because every little error you make is going to be magnified as it goes down range. Grip size is another thing. Full-size guns have a great grip, in my opinion, that almost feels like it just extends your appendage versus your smaller, compact weapons, a little lacking. Nothing's particularly wrong with them, but you're going to have to be more conscious whenever you're aiming or trying to take care of business. Beyond the grips, we have sight radius. Now, looking down the barrel, I can easily see the front sight, which is your most important one when it comes to handguns. But the smaller the gun, the smaller sight. Let me show you a comparison up close. So the smaller the firearm, the more increased focus. The bigger the firearm, we're getting close to point and shoot. But remember, you're accountable for every round that comes from these items, so be careful. Short guns don't forgive mistakes. Your smaller firearms demand better fundamentals. Now let's talk ammunition real quick. I want you to understand that ammunition makes, like the material they're made from, have a huge impact on your firearm. When guns malfunction, it's usually the ammunition that's the first suspect. I don't have any steel case ammo today to show you, unfortunately, but quick little story. Grab my service weapon to keep on top of my skills, buy a bunch of cheap ammo. Nothing wrong with shooting cheap ammo for target practice. I bought steel case ammo, the cheapest. I was about 200 rounds in when all of a sudden I get a jam. Looking inside, I see the butt of some brass still in there. Got a double feed. So cleared out the mag, tried to clear the jam by putting a wooden dowel down the barrel of my gun. I could not get it out. It ended up that I had to take it to the department's armor to remove it, and it took two guys, a rubber mallet, and a wooden dowel to finally break it free. The culprit, steel case ammo, which I will not put through this weapon again. But that's a side note. Cheaper, but it comes at a cost. For you new shooters, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. There's not just regular 9mm. You might see different grades, for lack of a better term, of ammunition, like plus P. You need to understand that your firearm needs to be capable of shooting that hotter, what I'll call hotter powder, because it sends a projectile out faster than your regular average, just regular 9mm, for example. So please make sure that your weapon can fire the plus P and above, and that you know what kind of ammo you're buying. And when you buy for carrying, make sure to get quality. Steel is cheaper, but it's less forgiving in many firearms. Now let's talk sights. Iron sights is a reference made for what is basically on the gun when you buy it, without any special optics. Revolvers are even more difficult to aim with due to the low rear sight profile, just a groove here, and your very thin front sight. Most of your semi-automatic are going to have a front post or front sight and a rear that looks somewhat like that. Much more visible, easier to aim. Now this is for you new shooters. I would suggest if you are learning how to shoot a firearm that you get to one with an optic. A little red dot, it's all you need. But two things you need to learn how to do, whether you choose iron sights or this red dot or any kind of other optic. Learn to shoot with both eyes open. I know you see the person squinting and taking their time to aim, and you'll hit your target. But under a stress environment, you won't close that other eye, and therefore you're going to shoot different. You need to train how you plan on operating. With that also said, one thing that we had to be taught, because we didn't have red dots on our original guns, is don't chase the dot. Meaning you're not looking at the dot in order to hit your target. You're looking at your target and you put the dot on it. So the best I can explain is you have an object, your target, you look at the bullseye first like this, and you raise the gun up and just put the dot on it. That's simple. Now with iron sights, your front sight is the most important one. That's the one you kind of act like the red dot, you're putting it on the target. This is kind of level it out by putting, depending on your distance, you're putting the front sight in the middle and flush with the rear sight to make you level versus canted. Now I will say that I can hit it 100 yards, no problem with the pistol, but that's not what they're designed for. They're designed for close quarters. Basically, the easiest way to break it down is inside a room. Your technology should support your skills, not replace it. Moving on to our next topic, open carry, concealed carry. How do you determine which one's best for you? I'm going to provide, this is for everything from experienced, expert shooters to your beginners. I'm going to put a little food for thought in your mind, coming from a police officer and seeing several instances that things went south when they didn't have to. First of all, in Texas, in order to open carry, you have to have it in a holster. That's pretty much there's other little requirements, but that's the biggest one that gets people in trouble. But there are pros and cons. Pro, you have it out in the open, you deter threats because they see that you're armed. There's also cons of the exact same. You make yourself a target because they see you're armed. So they know they have to take you out first. Criminals don't think fully logical. If they're going to carry out a task and they're already going to break a law, you're just an object in their way. So when you open carry, keep that in mind. Number 2 on the con list, you need to understand that situational awareness needs to be heightened. Just because you have a firearm out in the open where everybody sees it, I can tell you the retention on these firearms that I see, I saw one Walmart yesterday, the retention on these holsters for the firearm are pressure or click in, the codex. That's all they have. They don't have any full level 2, level 3 type retentions. For you new guys, that just means different things you have to do in order to remove the firearm. So just a little thought before we have our firearms out in the open. Are we watching all those people around you? And am I making myself a bigger target than I am deterring the threat? Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's always smart. Here's a little more food for thought, and it's in reference to home defense. Of the handguns that I've shown, I could tell you that most YouTube videos and stuff that I've seen, they run around with a pistol to defend their home. That will take care of the threat, but does it put your family at a higher risk as well? As I mentioned before, I have firsthand seen 9mm rounds go through 6 walls. That's a lot of penetration. That's over penetration. If your loved ones are in rooms and you're discharging a firearm in a panic situation, you may not be thinking what's behind your target that you may be putting at risk while you're trying to defend it. With that said, I move towards the shotgun. Not with full buckshot for heavy loads or whatnot. I'm talking birdshot for dove, that level. That has been proven to go through at least one wall or two sections, the 2 half-inch sections of drywall. But the lethality past that point diminishes considerably. Now, I'm not saying it can't happen, and I'm not saying that's the go-to. Just food for thought on when you're trying to select a firearm for home defense. It doesn't have to be this exact one, but the Judge is a handgun that shoots 410 rounds, which is a shotgun round. Loading birdshot in that will either deter or take care of the problem of an intruder in your home while putting your loved one or whoever you're defending, whether it be yourself even, at lower risk. So at home, my priorities change. Out in the field, I'm going to choose at least a 9mm. At home, I'm going with a little more scattergun power. And shotguns tend to end the conversation. Shotguns have simplicity and reliability, which matters most at home. So I think I fulfilled what I told you this episode was going to be about. We talked about pistols, the different calibers, their capabilities, my first-hand observations of the calibers that were seen on the street. We discussed the firearms, their accuracy and the grips and the barrel length and all that affect those things. Ammunition choices, the types of ammunition with the steel case and brass. And we also talked about the sights, being iron sights, the stock sights, or an optic. Now we did discuss open carry, concealed carry, the kind of pros and cons of them. But did you know I'm packing heat right now? That's a true threat when you don't know where the threat's coming from. And we also talked about home defense and my personal preference and the reason why behind it. In regards to those informed decisions, I will tell you that in Texas, you have to use the same amount of force that's being presented to you. If I'm threatening to beat you up with my fists, you have to fight me with your fists. You cannot escalate to a firearm because I'm threatening you with my fists. If I come at you with a knife, a firearm, a bat, something capable of inflicting serious bodily injury or death, then you can activate your firearm. However, I will also caution you with this because I've seen people die because of this. If you present your firearm and don't intend on using it, you can expect when that suspect realizes you're not going to use it to try to take it from you. And guess where he's going to use it? There was a preacher that had someone trespassing inside the church. He presented his firearm, followed the guy around in the church until they ended up in the bathroom. In the bathroom, the suspect took the gun and killed the preacher. Do not present that weapon unless you intend on using it. Most of the time, they don't care you're pointing a gun at them. Keep that in mind. Tools matter, but judgment matters more. Check out some of my other videos. I'm trying to inform the public, trying to help the relation between the police officer and the citizen. And with that said, stay sharp, stay safe, stay ready for the unexpected, and as always, thank you for hanging out with me in the Hideout. Till next time.